nesting and healing, and also, I don't even know I had the bandwidth at that time to think about what the big picture dream was. There was no plan. It was just, let's get through these next couple years, create community.
The palace is in absolute chaos right now. Princess Anne and Princess Catherine just appeared together in what can only be described as a royal emergency, and what they revealed about Meghan Markle is absolutely shocking. Their faces said it all. This was not a routine announcement. This was a warning. The lies have been exposed, the evidence is devastating, and the monarchy may never recover from what's about to come out.
I think he'll change. He is committed to his own level of service, and that will remain.
You won't believe what they're hiding. What happens in the next 48 hours could destroy the royal family forever. Cameras rushed to capture the scene as journalists scrambled to understand what was happening. The two women, known for their calm and measured approach to royal duties, addressed the press with a level of seriousness typically reserved for matters of national importance. Their words were careful, deliberate, and painfully brief. But it was not what they said that sent shockwaves through the nation. It was what they chose not to say. They spoke about integrity being compromised. They mentioned consequences that could not be reversed. They referenced trust within the institution being severely tested. Yet throughout the entire statement, no names were mentioned. No specific incidents were detailed. No direct accusations were made. The omission itself became the story. Within minutes, speculation exploded across every news outlet and social media platform. Who were they talking about? What had happened? And why now? The answer, though unspoken, seemed obvious to many observers. The crisis appeared to centre around Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, who had already been the subject of intense media scrutiny since her departure from royal duties years earlier. But this time felt different. This was not about tabloid drama or family disagreements aired in interviews. This was the royal family itself, through two of its most respected members, suggesting that something far more serious had occurred. According to sources familiar with palace operations, the decision to make any public statement at all had been the subject of heated internal debate. Some advisors had pushed strongly for complete discretion, arguing that royal matters should always be handled privately, away from public view. They worried about the optics, the precedent, and the potential for escalation. Others felt that remaining silent would only allow misinformation to spread further and faster, potentially causing even greater damage to the monarchy's reputation. Princess Anne and Princess Catherine apparently fell into the latter camp. After what insiders describe as discussions that stretched late into the night, they concluded that silence was no longer an option. The public needed to know that the royal family was aware of serious issues and was taking them seriously, even if the full details could not yet be disclosed. The statement itself was striking in its restraint. There were no emotional outbursts, no dramatic revelations, no direct confrontations. Instead, the two women delivered their message with the kind of controlled authority that has defined the British monarchy for generations. Princess Anne, with her decades of unwavering service and reputation for straight talk, provided the backbone of the announcement. Princess Catherine, increasingly seen as the future of the institution, added a layer of relatability and modern sensibility. What made the moment even more powerful was the visible emotion behind their composure. Those who know Princess Catherine well noted that she appeared shaken, as if the weight of what she was addressing had taken a personal toll. Princess Anne, while maintaining her trademark stoicism, seemed to carry an unusual intensity in her expression. These were not scripted performances or political theatre. These were two women addressing something that clearly troubled them deeply. Reports suggest that the final trigger for this public statement came from a specific incident involving documentation. Allegedly, papers had been circulated to legal teams associated with Meghan's charitable foundation, papers that contained information contradicting existing royal records. When Princess Anne and Princess Catherine began cross-referencing these claims with official archives, they discovered discrepancies that could not be easily explained or dismissed. The nature of these discrepancies has not been made fully public, and the palace has maintained strict confidentiality about the specifics. What has been shared through carefully worded statements and background briefings to select journalists suggests that the issues go beyond simple misunderstandings or clerical errors. The language used by those close to the situation points to something more deliberate, more systematic, and potentially more damaging to the institution. The public reaction was immediate and intense. Within an hour of the statement, social media platforms were flooded with commentary, analysis, and speculation. Royal commentators, both professional and amateur, began dissecting every word, every pause, every facial expression. News networks interrupted regular programming to discuss what this might mean for the future of the monarchy. International media picked up the story, recognizing that this was not just British news, but a story with global implications. Many observers noted that this approach represented a significant departure from traditional royal protocol. Historically, the monarchy has operated under the principle that family matters, disputes, and controversies should never be aired publicly. The famous phrase "never complain, never explain" has long been a guiding principle for senior royals. Yet here were two of the most senior and respected members of the family doing exactly what tradition would normally forbid. This shift in strategy appears to reflect a recognition that the media landscape has changed dramatically. In an era of instant communication, viral content, and competing narratives, the old approach of dignified silence may no longer be sufficient. If someone is actively shaping public perception through selective information or questionable claims, waiting months or years to set the record straight may allow falsehoods to become accepted as truth. The statement also seemed designed to send a clear message to Meghan herself, though again without naming her directly. By going public with even this limited information, Princess Anne and Princess Catherine were essentially saying that they were watching, documenting, and prepared to take further action if necessary. It was a warning shot across the bow, a signal that the palace was no longer willing to simply absorb criticism or allow its narrative to be controlled by others. For many royal watchers, this moment represented something larger than just one controversy or one individual. It reflected the ongoing tension between tradition and modernity, between privacy and transparency, between protecting the institution and defending individual reputations. The monarchy has survived for centuries by adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining core principles. This statement appeared to be another example of that evolution, an acknowledgement that in the digital age, complete silence is sometimes interpreted as weakness or guilt. As the initial shock began to settle, questions multiplied. What would happen next? Would there be further statements? Would legal action follow? Would Meghan respond? And if so, how? The palace offered no additional clarity, maintaining that they had said what needed to be said for now. But everyone understood that this was not an ending. This was a beginning, the opening chapter of what could become one of the most significant challenges the modern monarchy has faced. The emergency announcement had served its purpose. It put the world on notice that something serious was unfolding, and that the royal family, for perhaps the first time in recent memory, was willing to fight back publicly to protect its integrity and its future. The public statement by Princess Anne and Princess Catherine did not emerge from nowhere. Behind their carefully controlled appearance lay weeks of private investigation, growing concern, and mounting evidence that something had gone seriously wrong within the palace walls. To understand how the situation reached such a critical point, it is necessary to go back to the quiet moments when the first signs of trouble began to appear. Princess Catherine had been the first to notice something unusual. In her role as a senior working royal, she regularly reviews schedules, communications, and documentation related to official engagements and family matters. During one such routine review, she came across minor inconsistencies in the records, a date that did not align with her own calendar, a signature on a document that seemed out of place, an event described in one file that contradicted information in another. At first, these discrepancies seemed insignificant, the kind of administrative errors that occasionally occur in any large organization. Catherine initially assumed they were simple mistakes made by overworked staff members juggling multiple responsibilities. But something about the pattern troubled her. Rather than dismissing her concerns, she began to dig deeper, cross-referencing different sources of information and comparing official records with her own personal notes and memories. What she discovered alarmed her. The inconsistencies were not random errors scattered throughout unrelated documents. They appeared to cluster around specific events and timelines, many of which involved or referenced Meghan Markle. Dates of royal engagements had been subtly altered. Records of who attended certain private meetings did not match what Catherine remembered. Even financial disclosures related to charitable activities contained information that conflicted with other official sources. The more Catherine investigated, the clearer it became that these were not innocent mistakes. The alterations appeared deliberate and systematic, designed to support a particular version of events that did not align with reality. In some cases, the changes were subtle enough that they might have gone unnoticed indefinitely. In others, they were more significant, potentially affecting how both the public and historians would understand key moments in recent royal history. Catherine also began to notice something else disturbing. Anonymous posts on certain online message boards and encrypted platforms contained information that seemed to come from inside palace circles. These leaks included excerpts from emails and references to private communications. The language was often vague and carefully constructed to avoid direct accusations, but the underlying message was clear. Someone with access to confidential information was sharing it selectively, shaping a narrative that served specific interests. Some of these leaked communications hinted at coordination between Meghan and a small group of advisors based outside the United Kingdom. The messages discussed strategy, timing, and messaging in ways that suggested long-term planning rather than spontaneous reactions to events. While nothing in these communications was explicitly damning, taken together they painted a picture of calculated influence rather than organic responses to difficult circumstances. Recognizing the potential implications of what she had uncovered, Catherine knew she needed support from someone with both the authority and the fortitude to take action. She turned to Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, who has built a reputation over decades for her no-nonsense approach to duty and her unwillingness to tolerate anything that might undermine the institution she has served her entire life. Princess Anne did not dismiss Catherine's concerns or suggest she was overreacting. Instead, she immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation and began conducting her own investigation. Anne brought a different set of skills to the task. With her long experience and deep knowledge of how the palace operates, she knew exactly where to look and which questions to ask. She began assembling a confidential timeline, drawing on handwritten notes from her own files, access logs that tracked who entered which parts of the palace and when, and private correspondence that had been carefully preserved over the years. As Anne and Catherine compared their findings, the picture became increasingly troubling. They discovered that Meghan had made strategic moves during key royal events that seemed designed to maximize her own visibility while subtly undermining official palace messaging. There were instances where she had requested private meetings with foreign dignitaries without going through proper channels. Press releases had been altered, sometimes in minor but significant ways, before being distributed to the media. Timing of certain public appearances seemed calculated to draw attention away from other royal family members or to create specific narrative contrasts. Understanding the gravity of what they had uncovered, Princess Anne decided to alert King Charles and Queen Camilla. She approached them privately, presenting her findings with the same directness she brings to all her work. But the response she received was not what she had hoped for. According to people familiar with these conversations, King Charles characterized the situation as a regrettable misunderstanding rather than a serious breach of trust. He seemed reluctant to confront the issue head-on, perhaps hoping that with time and distance, the problems would resolve themselves. Queen Camilla, for her part, reportedly urged caution and restraint. Her concerns focused primarily on optics and public perception. She worried that taking aggressive action or making accusations, even privately, could backfire and create a larger crisis than the one they were trying to manage. Her advice was to let the matter settle, to avoid escalation, and to trust that the truth would eventually become clear without forcing a confrontation. This response proved frustrating for both Anne and Catherine. They felt they had presented clear evidence of a problem that required immediate attention, yet the palace leadership seemed more concerned with avoiding conflict than addressing the underlying issues. Left without official support or authorization to pursue the matter further, the two women found themselves operating in the shadows, continuing their investigation without the backing of the institution they were trying to protect. The situation inside the palace began to deteriorate. Staff members, sensing tension and divided loyalties, started to align themselves with different factions. Some remained committed to traditional protocol and official channels, refusing to acknowledge that anything was seriously wrong. Others, perhaps influenced by personal relationships or intimidated by the potential consequences of speaking out, chose to remain silent even when they possessed information that might have been relevant. Trust, which is essential for any organization, but particularly crucial in an institution as tradition-bound as the monarchy, began to erode. People became cautious about what they said and to whom they said it. Meetings that would once have been straightforward became exercises in careful language and diplomatic maneuvering. The normally smooth operation of royal business became complicated by suspicion and uncertainty. Meanwhile, the public remained completely unaware of the internal turmoil. The royal family continued to present a united front at official events and in public statements. Photographs showed smiling faces and coordinated appearances. Press releases described successful engagements and positive initiatives. The carefully maintained image of stability and continuity gave no hint of the crisis brewing beneath the surface. But Princess Catherine understood something that others seemed to miss or choose to ignore. If the foundation of the monarchy's credibility was built on falsified or manipulated narratives, the eventual discovery of that deception would cause catastrophic damage. It was no longer just about family relationships or personal grievances. It was about the fundamental trustworthiness of the institution itself. If the public came to believe that the palace routinely altered records, suppressed inconvenient truths, or allowed misleading information to stand uncorrected, the long-term consequences could be devastating. She and Princess Anne reached the same conclusion independently, and then confirmed it with each other. They could not wait for permission or approval from palace leadership. They could not rely on traditional channels or hope that someone else would eventually take action. The lies and distortions were not just whispered rumors or private disagreements. They were documented, recorded, and in some cases, officially stamped into the historical record. If they did nothing, future generations might accept falsehoods as established facts, and the monarchy's reputation would be built on a foundation of deception. The decision to move forward without full support from King Charles and Queen Camilla was not made lightly. Both women understood that they were taking significant personal and professional risks, but they also understood that some responsibilities transcend institutional hierarchy and personal comfort. Their loyalty was not to individuals or to avoiding difficult conversations. Their loyalty was to the truth and to the future integrity of the crown itself. As the evidence mounted and the pattern of deception became undeniable, Princess Anne reached a decision point that would fundamentally alter the course of events. She had spent her entire life serving the monarchy with quiet dedication, avoiding the spotlight whenever possible and focusing on duty rather than drama. But there comes a moment when silence itself becomes a form of complicity, and for Anne, that moment had arrived. She requested an emergency meeting with King Charles, bypassing the usual layers of courtiers and private secretaries who typically manage such interactions. This alone was unusual enough to signal the seriousness of her intentions. When she entered the king's private study, she carried with her a sealed dossier, carefully compiled over weeks of investigation. The contents represented not just allegations or suspicions, but documented evidence of systematic manipulation of palace records and narratives. Anne placed the file on her brother's desk and delivered an ultimatum that was as shocking as it was unprecedented. If the king would not take immediate action to address the situation, she would. The implications of this threat were enormous. Princess Anne is not given to empty gestures or emotional outbursts. When she makes a statement, it carries the weight of absolute conviction. Charles understood immediately that she was not bluffing. The dossier itself was a masterpiece of methodical documentation. Anne had approached the task with the same precision she brings to all her work. Every claim was supported by multiple sources. Every inconsistency was cross-referenced against official records. Dates, times, locations, and participants were all verified and documented. The file included copies of altered documents alongside their original versions, showing exactly what had been changed and when. It contained transcripts of communications that contradicted public statements. It presented a timeline that made the pattern of deception impossible to dismiss or explain away. Some of the discoveries were relatively minor on their own, but significant in aggregate. Guest lists for private events had been modified to include or exclude certain individuals. Itineraries had been adjusted after the fact to create false impressions about who met with whom and when. Media briefings contained information that palace staff knew to be inaccurate but had been instructed not to correct. Each individual instance might have been overlooked or rationalized, but together they formed a clear picture of intentional distortion. Other findings were more serious and potentially more damaging. Financial records related to charitable foundations showed discrepancies that raised questions about transparency and accountability. Communications with foreign representatives had occurred outside proper diplomatic channels. Information that should have remained confidential within the royal household had somehow found its way to external parties who then used it for their own purposes. When Queen Camilla attempted to intervene in the meeting, as she often does when palace tensions threatened to escalate, she found that her usual influence had no effect. Princess Anne was not interested in mediation or compromise. She reminded both Charles and Camilla of her decades of service, her consistent record of putting duty above personal interests, and her history of avoiding public controversy. The fact that she was taking such a strong stand now should have made clear to them just how serious the situation had become. Anne's threat was not merely personal, but institutional. She warned Charles that if immediate steps were not taken to confront the problem and correct the public record, she would resign from her official royal duties. She would cite irreconcilable ethical concerns as her reason for stepping back. For a senior royal of Anne's stature and reputation to take such a step would send shockwaves throughout the Commonwealth. It would signal to the world that something had gone profoundly wrong inside Buckingham Palace, something serious enough to drive away one of the monarchy's most devoted servants. The impact of such a resignation would extend far beyond immediate headlines. Princess Anne is widely respected for her work ethic and her commitment to hundreds of charitable organizations and patronages. She undertakes more official engagements than almost any other member of the royal family, year after year, without complaint or fanfare. Her departure would leave a void that could not easily be filled, and more importantly, it would raise questions that the palace would find extremely difficult to answer. Throughout this period, Princess Catherine remained a steady presence and crucial ally. She provided Anne with additional documentation that she had been quietly collecting, including classified notes that had not yet been reviewed by others in the family. She also shared personal communications that illuminated how the manipulation had affected not just institutional matters, but individual relationships and reputations. The two women had become an effective team, combining Anne's institutional knowledge and authority with Catherine's careful attention to detail and her understanding of how modern media shapes public perception. Their collaboration was particularly powerful because they represented different generations and different aspects of the monarchy. Anne embodied tradition, continuity, and unwavering commitment to duty as it has been understood for decades. Catherine represented the future, a more accessible and relatable version of royalty that connects with contemporary audiences while still respecting fundamental principles. Together, they formed a united front that the palace leadership could not easily dismiss or divide. While others in the palace whispered about damage control and worried about public relations fallout, Anne and Catherine focused on a different priority. They were preparing for impact, accepting that there would be consequences and controversy, but believing that facing those challenges was preferable to allowing deception to continue unchecked. They understood that short-term pain was necessary to prevent long-term institutional decay. For King Charles, this moment represented a profound dilemma. On one side stood his sister and his daughter-in-law, two of the most respected and capable members of his family, presenting him with evidence of serious wrongdoing and demanding action. On the other side stood his natural instinct to avoid conflict, his concern about the public spectacle that confrontation would create, and perhaps his own complicated feelings about family relationships that had already been strained by years of tension and public controversy. The king's reluctance was not simple cowardice or denial. He had lived through his own share of royal scandals and understood how quickly situations could spiral out of control once they became public. He worried about the precedent that would be set by directly confronting Meghan or making accusations that could lead to legal battles and endless media coverage. He feared that the attempt to restore integrity might paradoxically damage the institution even further by exposing its vulnerabilities and internal divisions. But Anne and Catherine had considered all these concerns and concluded that the greater risk lay in inaction. They believed that the monarchy's strength ultimately rested on its credibility and its connection to truth. If that foundation was compromised, no amount of public relations management or strategic silence would preserve the institution's legitimacy over time. Better to face a difficult crisis now than to allow deception to metastasize until it became impossible to address. As the pressure mounted on Charles to make a decision, another factor entered the equation. Prince William, who had been following these developments closely, reached his own breaking point. Unlike his father, William did not have the luxury of hoping that time would solve the problem. As the heir to the throne, he understood that every day the situation remained unaddressed was another day of potential damage to the institution he would one day lead. William's frustration manifested not in public outbursts but in cold, calculated determination. He requested a comprehensive internal review with full access to all relevant documentation, staff interviews, and communications records. He wanted a real investigation, not a symbolic gesture designed to create the appearance of action while actually avoiding difficult truths. When he encountered resistance from advisors who worried about opening Pandora's box, his response was unequivocal. The box was already open, he argued. The only question was whether they would acknowledge what was inside or continue to pretend they could keep it closed. The turning point came during a private gathering at Sandringham, away from the formality and constant observation of Buckingham Palace. In that setting, William confronted his father directly about the evidence that Anne and Catherine had compiled. He laid out the timeline, explained the implications, and made clear his view that continued inaction would be interpreted not as prudent caution, but as weakness or complicity. The conversation was difficult and emotional in ways that royal interactions rarely are. Words were exchanged that had never been spoken before in their relationship. William reportedly left the meeting without observing the usual formal courtesies, a breach of protocol that in itself signaled how serious the rupture had become. In the days that followed, a recording surfaced, apparently captured inadvertently, in which William could be heard expressing his frustration to a confidant. His voice carried the exhaustion and pain of someone who felt betrayed, not just by external actors, but by his own family's failure to act decisively. Throughout all of this, Princess Catherine remained steadfast in her support of her husband, while maintaining her own independent commitment to truth. She had experienced firsthand the cost of allowing false narratives to stand, unchallenged. She had watched as misleading stories about her character, her family, and her relationships had been allowed to circulate without effective correction. She had endured criticism and judgment based on distorted versions of events. She was determined that her children would not inherit a monarchy built on such shaky foundations. The combination of Anne's ultimatum, Catherine's documented evidence, and William's direct confrontation created a situation that Charles could no longer avoid. The palace activated a rarely used emergency protocol, signaling that the matter had escalated beyond ordinary family disagreements into something that threatened the institution itself. A crisis classification normally reserved for threats to the monarchy's legitimacy was invoked, transforming the situation from a private matter into an official emergency requiring immediate institutional response. The decision to hold a face-to-face meeting was made with great reluctance, but growing inevitability. After weeks of investigation, mounting evidence, and internal pressure, the palace concluded that the situation could not be resolved through intermediaries or carefully worded statements. A direct confrontation was necessary, one that would either clear the air or make the breach irreparable. The location chosen was Highgrove House, away from the public eye and the constant scrutiny of London, a place where difficult conversations could happen without immediate media intrusion. The invitation extended to Meghan was crafted with diplomatic precision. The language emphasized reconciliation and clarification, suggesting that this would be an opportunity to address misunderstandings in a calm and private setting. What Meghan apparently did not realize was that Princess Anne and Princess Catherine had no intention of allowing the meeting to devolve into vague discussions of hurt feelings and different perspectives. They came prepared with documentation, timelines, and specific questions that demanded specific answers. Princess Anne, true to her character, wasted no time on pleasantries. Shortly after everyone was seated, she placed the dossier on the table between them. The folder bore the royal crest, a visual reminder that this was not just a family gathering, but an official matter of institutional concern. Inside were the fruits of weeks of investigation, page after page of contradictions, inconsistencies, and documented alterations. Anne slid the file forward and stated plainly that these were not misunderstandings or matters of interpretation. These were manufactured discrepancies that had been deliberately introduced into the official record. Meghan's reaction was immediate and forceful. She pushed back against what she characterized as an ambush, an orchestrated attempt to corner her with rehearsed accusations and selectively presented evidence. Her tone grew defensive as she suggested that the documents had been taken out of context or were themselves the product of biased review. She argued that she had been misled by advisors, misquoted by the media, and misunderstood by family members who had never fully accepted her in the first place. But Princess Catherine was not interested in relitigating old grievances or debating subjective interpretations of past events. She spoke with a quiet intensity that those present described as more powerful than any raised voice could have been. She addressed Meghan directly about the personal cost of allowing falsehoods to shape public narratives. She spoke about her children, about the legacy they would inherit, about the impossibility of building a stable future on a foundation of distorted truth. Catherine described specific instances where she had seen her family misrepresented in ways that were not just unflattering but fundamentally untrue. She talked about the weaponization of motherhood, the use of children as props in public relations strategies, and the pain of watching false stories gain traction while the truth remained unspoken out of a desire to maintain dignity and avoid public conflict. Her words carried the weight of genuine hurt, not manufactured outrage or strategic posturing. Meghan continued to resist, insisting that her own experiences had been dismissed and minimized, that she had faced genuine hardship and hostility that others refused to acknowledge. She maintained that any discrepancies in the record resulted from honest mistakes or from being given incorrect information by people she had trusted. She positioned herself as a victim of institutional bias, rather than an architect of deliberate deception. Princess Anne's response to this defense was characteristically direct. She pointed out that the pattern of alterations consistently benefited one narrative while undermining another. She noted that the so-called mistakes always seemed to favor a particular interpretation of events. She made clear that the evidence suggested coordination and intention rather than innocent confusion. And then she delivered a warning that shifted the entire atmosphere of the meeting. If Meghan continued to deny responsibility and refused to acknowledge the documented problems, Anne stated, then the palace would be forced to act unilaterally. This was not about destroying anyone's reputation, Anne emphasized, but about protecting what remained intact within the institution. The monarchy could survive controversy and even scandal, but it could not survive a fundamental loss of credibility regarding its own internal operations and records. At this point, Meghan's legal representatives, who had been present but largely silent, finally intervened. The tone of the meeting changed as lawyers on both sides began discussing potential consequences in more formal terms. Concepts like disclosure, reputational damage, and litigation entered the conversation. What had begun as a family confrontation was now clearly moving into legal territory, with all the complications and public exposure that would entail. The meeting ended without resolution or reconciliation. No agreements were reached, no apologies were offered, and no commitments were made. Instead, both sides left with a clearer understanding of where the other stood and how serious the situation had become. For Princess Anne and Princess Catherine, the confrontation had confirmed their belief that direct engagement would not produce the accountability they sought. For Meghan and her team, it had made clear that the palace was prepared to escalate the matter beyond private discussions. In the aftermath of the Highgrove meeting, Princess Anne and Princess Catherine made a decision that would surprise even experienced royal watchers. They concluded that some form of public statement was necessary, not to air all the evidence they had gathered, but to signal that the institution was aware of serious problems and was taking them seriously. The alternative, remaining completely silent, now seemed untenable. Silence would be interpreted as weakness or complicity, allowing false narratives to continue shaping public perception unchecked. The statement they ultimately delivered was carefully calibrated to achieve multiple objectives simultaneously. It needed to be serious enough to convey the gravity of the situation without being so specific that it became tabloid fodder. It had to demonstrate institutional resolve without appearing vindictive or petty. It should signal to Meghan that further deception would not be tolerated, while leaving some room for future resolution if circumstances changed. When the two women appeared before the press, The contrast between their approach and typical royal communications was striking. There were no elaborate settings or formal ceremonies, just two senior royals standing together to deliver a message that clearly came from deep conviction rather than public relations calculation. Princess Anne spoke first, using language that was precise and measured, but unmistakably firm. She referenced discrepancies that could no longer be ignored and spoke about the primacy of truth in maintaining institutional integrity. Then, Princess Catherine added her perspective, framing the issue not just in institutional terms, but in personal and generational ones. She spoke as a mother concerned about the world her children would inherit, making clear that protecting the next generation required confronting difficult truths in the present. Her voice carried genuine emotion, not manufactured sentiment, and observers noted that this was not someone reading from a script, but someone speaking from conviction. The statement was brief, perhaps 3 or 4 minutes in total, but its impact was immediate and substantial. Within minutes, news alerts were going out across the globe. Royal commentators interrupted regular programming to analyze what had just occurred. Social media platforms erupted with reaction and speculation. The carefully set, chosen words, the decision to speak at all, the body language and tone, everything was dissected and debated. Notably, neither Anne nor Catherine mentioned Meghan by name. They did not need to. The context made clear what they were addressing, and the deliberate omission of specific accusations allowed the statement to function more as a warning than as an attack. It put everyone on notice that the palace was no longer willing to remain silent, but also demonstrated restraint by not turning the moment into a spectacle of accusation and counter-accusation. Public reaction was swift and largely supportive of the two royal women. Polling data that emerged in the following days showed a significant shift in public opinion. Many people who had previously been skeptical of the palace's position or sympathetic to Meghan's complaints began to view the situation differently. The dignity and restraint shown by Anne and Catherine, combined with their obvious seriousness of purpose, resonated with audiences who were tired of endless royal drama and wanted to see responsible leadership. Behind the scenes, however, Meghan's team was already preparing a response. They had been caught off guard by the timing and nature of the palace statement, but they quickly regrouped to formulate their own counter-narrative. Within hours, carefully worded statements began to circulate through spokespersons and friendly media outlets. The language emphasized disappointment and referenced selective storytelling, suggesting that the palace was presenting only one side of a complex situation. But the response lacked the impact that Meghan's previous public statements had generated. Perhaps the public was growing weary of the ongoing conflict, or perhaps the measured approach taken by Anne and Catherine had successfully shifted the narrative framework. Whatever the reason, the reaction to Meghan's counterstatement was notably more muted than it might have been months or years earlier. Then, approximately 24 hours after the palace statement, something unexpected occurred. A cryptic message appeared on a platform known for hosting whistleblower content and anonymous leaks. The post did not identify its source, but the implication was clear. It suggested that unreleased material existed, including audio recordings, internal communications, and documentation that could significantly alter public understanding of events within the royal family. The message was carefully constructed to avoid making specific claims while maximizing the sense of potential revelation. It referenced a vault of information that had been preserved and could be made public if circumstances warranted. The language suggested that what the palace had revealed was only a small fraction of a much larger story, one that would be far more damaging to the institution if fully exposed. Almost simultaneously, Meghan's legal team issued a more formal statement. While maintaining the language of potential reconciliation, it also reserved all legal rights and options. The final sentence was particularly notable, stating that should further provocation occur, additional evidence might be released. It was a threat wrapped in diplomatic language, a warning that the palace's decision to go public had not intimidated Meghan into silence, but had instead prompted her to prepare her own form of retaliation. Speculation immediately exploded across media platforms. Had Meghan secretly recorded conversations during her time as a working royal? Did she possess text messages or emails from senior family members? Were there documents or communications that the palace would find embarrassing or damaging if made public? Theories multiplied faster than they could be verified or debunked. Inside Buckingham Palace, the mood shifted from the brief satisfaction of having made a public statement to renewed concern about what might come next. King Charles convened another emergency meeting to discuss how to respond to this new development. Some advisors argued for immediate legal action to prevent any unauthorized disclosure of private communications. Others suggested that responding at all would only escalate the situation and give Meghan's threats more credibility than they deserved. Princess Anne's position remained consistent. She believed that the palace had done what needed to be done by speaking truthfully about the existence of serious problems. Whatever Meghan chose to do next would be her decision and her responsibility. The institution should not be held hostage by threats of revelation, Anne argued, because giving in to such pressure would only invite more of the same in the future. Princess Catherine agreed with Anne's assessment, but also recognized the human cost of continued conflict. She understood that every new development, every threat and counter-threat, took a toll on everyone involved, including the children who would grow up reading about these events in history, books. Yet she remained convinced that temporary discomfort was preferable to permanent corruption of the historical record. As the palace scrambled to prepare for potential new revelations, public interest continued to intensify. The story had everything that captures modern attention: family conflict, institutional crisis, questions of truth and deception, and the promise of secrets yet to be revealed. News organizations assigned teams to monitor the situation continuously. Royal commentators found themselves in constant demand for analysis and speculation. The world watched and waited to see what would happen next in a confrontation that showed no signs of reaching resolution.